Hiya, Petrina. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. With Steve Evans there next to me.
Howdy,
Hi,
Steve.
Petrina, you okay?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm good,
good to
thank
meet
you.
you. Good
Yep,
to
you
meet you.
too.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Petrina, before we talk about your writing, can you tell us a bit about yourself? From
Yeah,
Croydon, are you?
sure. I am from Croydon. Yes,
Yeah.
indeed.
Have you moved
Um,
house, you said recently?
yeah, I moved about 8 months ago, so still living in boxes.
Oh.
Yeah.
8 months later.
8 months later, yeah. I tell myself I'm organized, but I'm not. And so, yeah, originally from Croydon and then lived in Devon for 25 years and just moved, as I say, in the last year.
Yeah.
Still getting the hang of it.
Are your dogs liking the new house, or dogs?
It's 4 dogs at the
Yeah.
moment. Yeah, they seem to like it. We've got a garden here. The last place had a garden, but it wasn't fenced, so they were forever on leads, and there were a lot more squirrels. Where here we've got birds. So
I'm going to say massive difference between Devon and Croydon. Croydon is very, very close-knit, tight town, whatever,
it is.
really
Yeah.
hustle and bustle. And Devon, well, very relaxing, I would have thought. But
Yeah, I think because my parents were headed towards retirement age, and so they thought a more relaxed and comfortable sort of way of life would be easier for them. And a simpler sort of adolescence for me was the theory.
Outside of writing, what kind of hobbies do you enjoy? What do you do for fun? Or is it writing for fun?
I watch a huge amount of TV, like a massive amount of TV. It's almost a problem. I watch a lot of films, I knit, I spend time with my dogs. That's pretty much my life. I read a huge amount, of course, but yeah, it's all very sedentary. I should move more.
I don't know how you find time to knit. All right, spending time with the dogs, but to knit on top of all the writing you do as well, and reviewing.
I don't say I knit well.
Oh dear.
3-arm jumpers.
Pretty much I'm limited to blankets and scarves. It's anything that's basically straight lines and keep going until you run out of wool. So yeah, I'm not advanced enough for anything that involves cuffs.
You've got a pretty large catalogue of books there, looking at some of the books you've written, and they all seem to have a very similar theme. Well, death, canapés, sex, death, scallop, sex, and so on. What's this? I mean, why did you choose sex? Was it to get the reader, or was it you wanted to write about that in particular? Or
I think to begin with, the first book is Sex, Death and Canapés. And the reason for that was, to begin with, I was just going to call it the dinner party. It's all set around these slightly fancy pants dinner parties that the fairly ritzy country types go to. And none of them really likes anyone. They go really to show off. And there's perhaps a suggestion of a little bit of murder, maybe. To begin with, it was just going to be called The Dinner Party, and then I had a horrible feeling that someone would download it thinking it was some sort of etiquette guide or, an idea of which knife to start with and that sort of thing. And realistically, if you boil it right down, it is just mostly death and canapes, but there's a smidge of sex in there.
Much better title as well.
Yeah, exactly. The dinner party could be anything and should be, but yeah, I thought it was funny the first half dozen times I said it to myself, so I went with that. It tends to be a pattern with me. If it's a funny enough title, I'll stick with it.
Well, it certainly works. It got my attention straight away, and then you go on with Death and Scallops and Death and Venison and the girl with the cleavage, is it? I think.
Yes, girl with all the cleavage. Yep.
Is that a play on the girl with the dragon tattoo?
It's a play on pretty much everything. If you put into Amazon the girl with, there'll be a whole list of things there of the girl with the dragon tattoo, the girl on the train. There's the girl with or the girl on in a lot of titles. And it popped up as a line during the narrative. And I just thought, that's too funny to not have as the title. So I went with that.
fair enough. And yeah, I noticed you did the review on the girl on the train. I was just going to mention that, you beat me to it. But so yeah, a lot of girl on or girl with. Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, and I noticed you did a short story in 2021, was it, on the rule of six?
Yes.
I was having a quick look through that before, and I thought that was quite interesting. But I don't know if I read it too quickly, because I went through it quite quickly, and I wasn't quite sure if I got the meaning of it all. So maybe could you briefly give us a quick explanation of that?
Oh, what an excellent idea. I wish I'd read it recently. It's well, let's see. The rule of six had just come in as part of the government's policy to try and limit the spread of COVID. And it's very much in the vein of a lot of my short stories, that it all seems to be relatively understandable, and then there's a decent sized twist at the end. And with that one, it was, I think it was a bad breakup, or someone lusting for someone from afar, and then just deciding, do you know what? They're never going to notice me. Fine, I will call the police on them. And so, yeah, that's, I think it probably says something about me that I don't want it to say, but that's sort of my kind of thing. Oh,
yeah,
God,
it got me attention when you started talking about in the attic, I think, with binoculars.
Yes, that's it. That's right.
And I thought, aye, what's this got to do with the rule of six? But anyway.
Well, exactly.
No, Petrina, Steve mentioned there you got a great back catalogue. How long have you been writing for? Is this just over the past couple of years, this series of novels and short stories?
The novels and short stories have been, I think, the last 3 or 4 years. I've pretty much always written something, but never really thought to release anything to the world. That's been fairly recent, but yeah, it's sometimes you see on internet forums, writers, blogs and things, that people will say it's a really good idea to release things as quickly as possible. And the problem with that is sometimes the inspiration doesn't come, sometimes the quality isn't quite there. But with the short stories I did in 2020, it was something I'd started around about September, October of 2019. So I'd had a bit of extra time to ensure that there was something worth publishing, in my humble opinion. Doesn't mean I'm right, but yeah, it's one of those that has felt especially important now, because I suppose my life changed. I had thought that writing would be something I would do properly once I was retired. And then I looked at my life, and I was living in Devon and working in a bar twice a week. And I just thought, I am retired, so I'm going to do this now. So that's how it happened.
Okay.
Wow.
What, you say working in a bar, is this the British Legion?
That's the one.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed.
That was one of my next questions. Right. Anyway, that leads us nicely into that, doesn't it? So
well,
we wondered where the British Legion came into it. So come on, tell us a little bit more.
okay. So I started working at the Legion in my late 20s. I stayed there for 12 years as a barmaid, and was you become very involved when you work in a bar. You get to know all the people who come in, and especially your regulars. And the Grandad book, Other People's Granddads, is about the, behind you there, yes indeed, is about the chaps who make up sort of the regular guys at the bar, who seem or would look like anybody else's granddad or uncle or dad. And they're perfectly pleasant fellas, but you only need to talk to them for a little while to realize they have seen things, and a lot of them have traveled the world. They've mostly served in the military, and so with that, they know things I don't begin to guess at. And so it's really about that. And of course, you know, well, I typed it. We sat and had a chat, and I typed out what the fellas said. And of course, we're selling it for the Poppy Appeal, so it is a good thing, because of course the Poppy Appeal has its focus in November, but it's a year-round thing, so very important.
Okay. Can I ask you, you've gone down the independent route for publishing. Did you go through the normal route of trying to contact and, get connected with an agent and then a publisher traditionally?
I didn't, largely because I have a lot of friends online who are writers, and you hear the horror stories of people approaching agents, and hundreds of them, actually hundreds, and it takes months, and it's debilitating and depressing. And it just seemed like, I'm not that techie, but at the same time, if I can work out how to do this myself, I'll just crack on and do it. And if at some time an agent or a publisher happens to read something, which seems like a very small possibility, but if they read me at some point and like it, then I'll have saved myself a bit of time and heartache. But at the same time, it's so easy to self-publish, so it seemed like, why not?
Fair enough. Because did you self-publish in the end, Terry? I can't remember now.
I did as well. Yeah, the opposite of what you did, Petrina. I went through that pain of a couple of years of contacting and waiting 3 months for a reply, and the reply you get is just sorry, no thanks, move on, and send it to another one and another. So I think you've got a great philosophy about the way you've gone about that. You've got a great CV behind you now as well, for when you do decide to go down traditional publishing.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I've been a bit quiet the last couple of years with the house move and COVID. My old house basically fell apart around me. So it's normal stuff, but at the same time, it all happened at once. And so with that, I've slowed down a bit, but I haven't stopped.
Okay.
Which feels important.
Yeah. So in both of your books, there's a main character. Have I got this right? Fiona Weaver-King.
That's right.
Is that based on anyone in particular? Is it based on you by any chance?
I think the idea of the book actually came to me in a dream, which happens quite often, which is lucky. It saves me an awful lot of thinking time. But
wow.
Yeah, the idea for the last scene in that book popped into my head as a dream, and I just kind of worked back. Fiona isn't really based on anyone as far as I can tell. I may have to reread that one as well, because maybe with a bit of distance, maybe it turns out I do know her. I spent ages trying to think of a name for her, because I could see her quite clearly in my head. I knew what she looked like. I knew what she did for a living. I knew where she was from, but I could not get a name for her. And then I was watching a film called The Hippopotamus, which is based on the Stephen Fry book. And in it, there's a scene where Fiona Shaw walks across the screen in wellies. And I just thought, that's her. That's actually her. And so with that, I don't know Fiona Shaw. I live for the day, but right now I don't. And as such, I'm going to call her Fiona. And then Weaver-King just popped into my head. But yeah, she's a successful artist, painter, and in a completely loveless, miserable marriage that was never going to be happy, but she sort of didn't expect to be happy. She can't explain why she married him, so I've got no hope.
Designed the book covers. Did you do that yourself?
For
professional?
The Sex, Death and Dinner series was designed by, I do know her name, Fantasia Covers. I believe her name is Sharon. She's lovely. I haven't finished the series yet. Once I do, I will get back to her. And the short stories were designed by a chap who I do know his name as well, but he's on, I believe it's goonwrite.com. He's got loads of covers. They're all very impressive, lots of pre-mades and not frighteningly expensive. So that's always useful.
Yeah.
I have no gift for design, none. I couldn't work out a cover on my own. I get distracted by details. And so with that, I let other people deal with that.
I did my own a couple of times, and to be honest, they were awful. The first one was like a pirate's face upside down. It had nothing at all to do with the characters or the story. Another one with like an image of a scarecrow, but people said to me, what is the onion bag on the front page? And it's supposed to be the back end of a scarecrow, but it looks like a scarecrow to me.
Yeah, sure.
Not to anybody else.
Oh.
You got there in the end, Terry. You got there in the end. Changing it, I suppose, works. But yeah. Looking at your website as well, I mean, you say you're not good with covers, but yeah, that's what you leave other people to do. Fine. but you've come up with some great writing tips and on your website, and silly things that you wouldn't think of that are easy to understand. You put a glossary of terms in there, which I suppose is pretty obvious, most of it, but if you don't know, you don't know. So,
absolutely.
Yeah, good stuff. Really.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, I thought that was some good stuff. That I'm sure Terry would appreciate a lot of those writing tips as well.
Do you use social media a lot for marketing?
See, that's the thing. I do use it. And on Twitter, I play a lot of the writers' games, but I really don't understand marketing. I've read books on it. I sort of understand the theory, but then it leaves me completely when it comes to actually doing it.
Yeah.
That's something I need to work on. I think a lot of writers struggle with it. It's the work of actually writing a book is huge. And then editing it, tidying it up, making sure that it's ready for people to read it.
Yeah.
All big stuff. To then find, and that's half the battle. Now we need to sell the thing. It's exhausting and it's quite daunting. So I think I've been lucky that I've made friends among the writing community, and eventually we read each other.
Yeah.
Is that how you found proofreaders and people to critique your storylines and that, or was there another way?
Yeah, I did have an editor for a time. That didn't quite work out. Nothing that she did. She was brilliant. But I found as I worked my way from my first book, I became more confident. And I think it's because I started reading more. And so with that, I became more aware. And I do think it's important to read books, even books you don't like, even books that aren't very good, just so you know the difference between good and bad writing and what works and what doesn't. And so with that, I have come to rely more on myself and occasionally my partner, but very, very occasionally. It's one of those things when you find that you have someone in your life who means an awful lot to you, and then you find out they don't read, they don't like reading. That's quite shocking. But live and learn,
With editing your own work, how do you react when you see a typo in a traditionally published book? Do you look for them or?
Yes, I can't stop myself. It is dreadful. If I see it in a traditionally published book, I kind of laugh to myself. If it's in an indie, I feel bad.
Yeah.
If it's just the one or a couple, a handful, then fine. If it's loads, then it becomes very difficult to review them because I know how much work goes into it. And so I don't want to be mean for the sake of it, but I would rather, if it was me, that someone wrote a review, even if they trash the book, explaining what is wrong with it, rather than just leaving a rating. That I can't learn from that. So leaving a rating of 1 or 2 stars doesn't tell me what's wrong with it. And also other people might like the thing you hated. So if you would put 1 star, didn't like too much swearing, if I don't have a problem with swearing, that might be a book for me. So ratings are harder to deal with than reviews for me.
Okay,
but,
so what would your advice generally be to would-be writers who could be in the same position then, based on how reviews can look? They can look bad, they can look good, and yet everyone's got a different opinion, haven't they?
They have, absolutely. The thing is to keep writing, to not stop writing. It's so important to. I did step away from writing for about 10 years, and in that time I was sleepwalking pretty much through my life. There was nothing particularly important to me. There was nothing magical for me. And so always write and take the reviews with a pinch of salt. Fact is, if you write something that someone doesn't like, that's a shame. It wasn't the book for them. Doesn't mean it's not for someone else. So keep going, always, is my advice.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Are you writing full time now? Is this your day job?
Well, yes, it is. But as I say, I'm surrounded by boxes, so I do have quite a lot of things I should be doing, but I had quite a disastrous move, so that's turning into my new book, which is as yet untitled and almost not written at all, but I'm working on it.
Right.
Yeah.
So based on that, I take it some of your books are linked. They follow on, do they? Or are they all, they're obviously not all separate then, but you're looking at a separate one now by the sounds of it.
I am, yes. Any of the sex death ones, they're all linked.
Yeah.
The Girl with All the Cleavage is linked to that as well.
Yeah.
The short stories are completely independent of each other. And the Grandad book is, the only link is my name on the cover. That's the only link there, because that's nonfiction. But this new one will be completely separate from anything. Yeah, still working with some titles, still thinking them through, working out what's fun and what isn't.
Just going back to the Legion book, the Grandad's book, what kind of reaction did you get from the customers?
Very positive, really positive. It's because the village I used to live in is quite small and very wooded, very quiet, proper countryside. But it's one of those places that's everyone knows everyone, and everyone knows absolutely everything that's happening in your life, which can be limiting. But at the same time, it was surprising how many people read the book and were kind of shocked by some of the things that the fellas had done or been involved with, not in a bad way. Just, it's, as I was saying, if you walk into a bar and see a chap who's smartly put together, looks like probably a retired bank manager, and then you find out that he shot people during the war, that's a bit of a surprise, because you kind of, when you meet someone, whoever they are at that time, that's who you believe them to be often. And so it's quite easy to ignore or pass over an 80-something-year-old man and think he's an 80-something-year-old man, completely missing the point that he was a 20-year-old who was starting his life, maybe had a girlfriend or wife, or served in the military, served overseas, saw dreadful things. And if you're not of a military background, it can be hard to appreciate that. I myself am not. I mean, I've never been anywhere, not even halfway fit enough for anything military, but my dad was RAF. And so I have a slight root in there, but it's not the sort of closed secret society that might be anticipated, because the chaps are generally friendly, nice guys who've lived a lot and quite like having someone to talk to who listens. And it's, for whom it is new stuff, you know. The reason for the title is one of the chaps said that he was talking to me about his time during the Navy, and he said, I talked to my grandchildren about this and they just sort of shrug and, you know, that's Grandad. Where to me, it's fascinating because I've never heard any of this.
Yeah.
So,
of course, equally so, you could have an upstanding bank manager stood in the British Legion who could tell you about the world's worst robbery that happened in his bank, perhaps, you know, and that's a really interesting story, isn't it? And
of course it is.
Yeah, you just don't think about that sometimes, do you? You know, with, like you said, 80-odd-year-old Grandad in the corner.
Exactly.
So it makes you think. Yeah,
it
makes
does.
you think.
Sure.
Yeah, Petrina, have you got a writing routine that you stick to, or is he just sort of as the inspiration comes?
I used to have a writing routine that I stuck to, and I was really, really good at that. I got up late in the afternoon. If I was working in the bar, I went to the bar. I stayed there till approaching midnight, came home, wrote until about 5 a.m, went to bed. Yeah.
Wow.
And to be fair, it worked. I was happy with that. And then we moved house and I suddenly became an early riser, and I've got nothing now because my routine has gone. But I will find a new way. I have never really been a morning person, but I think afternoons, when there's nothing but Judge Judy on, that's what I will do. I will write.
I don't know why. I used to have a 2 o'clock message in my mind thinking, it's 2 o'clock now, I should be writing. I don't know, you've done that in the early hours of the morning. Was your brain not a bit foggy? Were you clear?
Arguably, it probably was a bit foggy. It was just, I have a house full of dogs. And so with that, it's a time when I know they're quiet. So I could get on with it. I'm not going to be bothered by the Amazon man trudging up the driveway. There's no appointment I need to get to because everyone's asleep. And so it was just easier to get it done in the middle of the night. But as I say, I will work on when would be an appropriate time to write. It's It's finding the time where there's no clutter. I can't write with an audience. The dogs are fine, but if we have people over, if my partner wants to watch something on the telly, it's a bit difficult. I can think about what I'm writing, but I can't really do it with anyone on the end of the sofa wanting to be entertained.
So going forward, then you're going to put in some sort of strict regime and get back to it, and or is that the plan?
I think I must. It's yeah, because I've been working in theory on this book for the last probably year, and yeah, no, I must get a routine in place in order to actually get it on the page. So that's what I will do.
Okay, and how many hours a day would you then generally spend writing? I mean, you've said, I think, coming in at, say, midnight, you'd probably write for 4 or 5 hours, possibly. Yes. Is that standard? Yeah.
Yes. It was.
Yeah, well,
I'm sure.
yeah,
I'm sure it will be again. Yeah, it could well be again. It's yeah. I mean, where I'm speaking to you from now is what will be my writing room. It's currently a room full of boxes, but once I've cleared those out, got a new floor in and set my desk up, then I will have a space. It's important to have space to do these things. But yes, I have promised now I will get it done. There we go. It's on camera. Boom.
Well, can I ask you maybe one final question? What's your ambition? Is it the typical writer's dream of getting stuff on the small screen or the big screen?
I would like that, definitely. I think I mean, you can say that probably just being able to support myself through my writing, being able to write something that really affects somebody and means something to somebody is very important. But yeah, if there's, a film deal in the offing, I'd be very happy with that. But certainly I wouldn't turn it down.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's really just to write something that matters and that will live after me. There you go. Gosh, profundity.
It is.
Hey, wow, that's, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I liked your line, actually. I wanted to mention that to you. I like the line that you put. I think it's on your Twitter. It's also on your website. Quirky, fun, and pleasantly disturbing.
Yes,
and I was a reviewer. I liked that a lot.
I was very pleased with that. It's yeah, it was a very, sometimes a reviewer writes something that is very meaningful and gets you through the more difficult days. But that one, I just thought, I'm putting that on business cards. That is going everywhere.
Yeah, that is definitely a good one, that, definitely.
Sure.
Oh, Petrina, I watched the YouTube video that's out there. I think is it your brother? He's interviewing you in the British Legion. You got like customers waiting to come into the room and things. Yeah,
one of my taken brothers. His name's Paul.
Okay.
I don't actually have brothers, but I've selected a whole group of men to be my 10 brothers. Like the granddads, but they're closer to me in age. And yeah, Paul is my taken brother. He has a YouTube channel, and we had thought we'd have the building to ourselves, that the place wasn't going to be opening up until about 7. And then it turned out that there was a Skittles match or something that had been scheduled for about 15 minutes after we started. Didn't know about that. And my old science teacher walked in just as we were talking about something that you don't talk to anyone in front of a science teacher about. I mean, it was a fairly detailed passage in one of my books. I don't even remember what it was, but I think it was a battery operated situation, whatever it was. My teacher walked in and I nearly died, and I couldn't explain why, because that's Miss Moa. I'm now friends with her on Facebook. We're okay. It's yeah. She hasn't.
She got the gist of it. Yeah. Just wouldn't grasp it. Yeah, wouldn't grasp it at first what it was all about, and probably a bit shocked and stunned. But yeah.
Paulie mentions a line in one of the books. I think it was brilliant. I think the line was something like, she smiled from her mouth down to her underwear or something like that.
That sounds like me. Yeah. That's something like me. Yep. That's yeah. There's an occasional. These are things that I just say often that don't really take a great deal of thought, and I don't really think of them as in any way interesting until I see other people's reactions to them. And so generally finding your writer's voice is supposed to be one of the hardest things. And for me, it's just remembering to actually write down things I say, because apparently they're odd, which is fine. I'm okay with that. Odd is fine.
Yeah, no wrong with that.
Thank you.
Makes people sit up and notice, doesn't it? If anything, nothing else.
Apparently so.
Yeah, get their attention.
Oh, brilliant.
Yeah, Petrina, it's been brilliant chatting to you. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you. It's been lovely talking to you.
Yeah.